Hi, everybody. So, I wanted to touch base with you and give you a brief little tour of the New York Times here, including some sections that I'd like you to take a look at and a couple of tips for how we can read the paper. I hope you're enjoying the subscription so far. As you see, there's a great deal of content that you can potentially look at. So you'll find here that this is kind of considered like the front page, if you will, of the New York Times here, where you see me kind of circling with my mouse. You'll also see that along here, along the right, we have the opinion pages. And we'll talk about, we kind of briefly touched on this a little bit in class, but the idea of what we expect from here, right? Objective, and objective news where the writer and his or her opinion is absent, whereas here you have the writers who are expected to actually take positions on issues, and then defend those stances or defend those positions. So two very different approaches, but we'll talk about where there's overlap between these, right? Is there an article on the border or ICE agents or Border Patrol that you see somebody here taking a stance on, and a lot of times you'll see this overlap. And I think it's always interesting to see when we consider these, right? Whose voices we hear from, whose voices are absent, right? Sometimes it's an interesting rhetorical choice. Whose voice on an issue has been marginalized, right? Who are we not hearing from? Whether it is something an article that's written in the more objective and opinionless news article, or the opinion op-eds here. Okay, so if you scroll up a little bit, you can see. Look at all these sections that you have the potential to read. You have the world, you have U.S., you have politics, you have sections specific to New York, you have business, opinion, tech, science, health, sports, arts, books, style, food, travel. The New York Times Magazine, which has longer read features, one of which actually is kind of an interesting one if you have time, discussion of college, what college admission offices really want. That's kind of this interesting exploration of grades and merit and really ultimately when it comes down to it, wealth. So you also see the T magazine. This is the New York Times Style magazine. Those of you who are interested in that. And then you have real estate, and then you have video. And if you scroll up here, you'll see these sections, and then you'll see even more. If you're so inclined, you can look at obituaries. You can click more here, and look at these sections. Oops, lost it there. And you can look at what sections appear here: newsletters, the crossword puzzle, the New York Times Film Festival. Food Festival, Wirecutter about technology, the School of New York Times. So all sorts of things, all sorts of content for you to kind of cut your teeth on as you get to know the paper a little bit. One way, and we didn't discuss this in class, but I will encourage you to take a look at it this way, is to go to this link. So app.newyorktimes.com, and what this does is this actually gives you a kind of a great simulation of what it would be like to actually read the paper, the physical paper, were you to subscribe to it. I think one of the things about digital content is it's always updating. Sometimes you see articles that are written from days ago, so they're not exactly the most current. And it's kind of a strange reading experience, and it's easy to kind of get caught, to fall into the wormhole of reading. And next thing you know, you're following hyperlinks all over here and there. But with this app called Today's Paper, you can click on it and read different sections. So it kind of simulates that reading experience were you to have that physical copy, which again is how I used to teach the New York Times here. So. I used to have students. I used to ask students to read the entire front page, and as you can see, this seems like a really high number of articles. So I'm not sure how it looks, how they fit that many articles on there. But apparently, this is the entire front page. So lucky you, you don't have to do that. Although I would encourage you to take a look. There's a rhetorical argument about the front page, which is to say, this is, even though we don't get opinions about the writers, from the writers, excuse me, this is, the editorial rhetorical decision. This is what we think is the most important news of the day. So it's an argument to inform, not to convince or persuade necessarily, but it is kind of, hey, this is the most important news. This is what you need to know, or we want you to know. So get a feel for this. Click on some stuff that you like. Get a feel for what's going on in the world. So I would normally have students read the front page, and I'll keep scrolling down here. And then we also read the Sunday Review. Now this is something that we will do throughout the quarter, is take a look at the Sunday Review, and you'll see that we click on this, and there's usually anywhere from 10 to 15 articles on the Sunday Review. This one, the Brett Kavanaugh fit in, she did not, is causing quite the stir on social media in terms of basically because there's another accusation of sexual assault against Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, which is in and itself an incredible piece of news, considering that there were several allegations of that when he was trying to be confirmed last year as a Supreme Court justice. But what's interesting about it and what's causing a bit of a stir for a lot of people is where this accusation is mentioned in the article. And it's like 9 paragraphs in, and not even necessarily, excuse me, still recovering from my sickness, not even necessarily the focus of the article, which is fascinating, and a fascinating editorial move in terms of why that accusation is buried so deep in the article. So I would definitely want you to check out the front page. I definitely want you to click on some articles in the Sunday Review here. There's a lot of political stuff, and I know, I've been accused of assigning too many political articles in the past. But as my man George Orwell said, everything is political, and I think it's important to keep up on politics, because politics, whether, a lot of people don't like politics because of that kind of binary system, right? Republicans and Democrats, right and left, but politics permeate into our lives in many ways, whether economic, racial, social, gender, sexual, all sorts of ways, and affect you. And find their way to you whether you want to or not. So that's also, we'll talk about that. And again, I try not to make things overtly political, where we're kind of falling into this, conservative versus liberal discussion every week. But you will find that there are a number of political articles that encourage you to take a look at, and maybe you find something interesting that you never knew you had an interest in before. So you'll see here, we got a little bit about Kavanaugh. We got a little bit about Elizabeth Warren. You have a graphic here that's just a drawing here. You have an issue of menopause. You have Margaret Atwood. You have an article about fires being set in the West Bank. There's a great little poetical look at a woman letting go of her daughter going off to college, and so this is kind of this interesting little narrative. So there's a lot of different styles and genres that appear in the Sunday Review, and that's normally why I like to assign it. But what I want you to read for this section is this article, and I thought this is great for several reasons. Number one is it's a great little personal narrative. It's great little kind of touches on ideas of relationship and communication, and so it's kind of told from the writer's perspective. Eve Pacer. I loved him, then I loved video games, but it also kind of, as it starts with the personal experience, it ends up delving into issues of gender, of masculinity, including toxic masculinity in the video game world. It ends a discussion of violence in video games and the results of that, and the studies that have shown, what studies have shown about, our penchant for violence and its connection to video games. But it's really kind of a fascinating. And the other thing that it's great is it's perfect for our first assignment, which is this kind of, we're blending genres of the narrative and the op-ed. So this is a perfect example of what we'll be looking at moving forward, and what you will end up writing is using personal experience to kind of delve into larger issues at hand. So that will be the article we'll discuss on Tuesday, and we'll have a class vote on what we want to discuss for Thursday. Remember, you guys get to choose, and even though we don't have a group that's going to pick this week, we'll kind of vote on a class. So, have an article that you read in the New York Times, whether the Sunday Review or the front page or somewhere else, and we'll have a class vote. You can kind of let us know, hey, I thought this was a good article, and we'll end up voting as a class on what we might like to discuss on Thursday. Okay, but yeah, have some fun out there. Get a feel for what's being written about, and again, things that you notice. We'll talk about your experience reading the paper, what you liked and what you didn't like. I think there's a lot to like, but as with anything, there's plenty to not like as well. So don't be afraid to talk about both of those things. Okay, so I will let you go. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Have a good day reading the New York Times, and I will see you on Tuesday. Okay, bye.